AI's impact on digital transformations, growing concerns among IT professionals about AI, as well as how AI is disrupting supply chain management. Those are just a few of the topics we'll cover here in episode 189 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 189. My name is Eric Kimberling. You're with Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great episode planned for you today. Before we jump into the outline or the agenda for today, this is a podcast that has everything to do with digital transformation. It's tech agnostic, independent, and meant to be objective. So we'll provide every week new topics related to digital transformations from a tech agnostic point of view. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and glad to be here today. And we've got a great episode planned for you. We're going to start off with some interesting newsworthy topics related to concerns among IT professionals about the impact of AI, as well as Salesforce's introduction of 2 new autonomous AI agents. So we'll talk a lot about AI in the opening segment. And then later in the show, our guest will be John Belden from UpperEdge, who's going to talk about how AI is being used in digital transformations and ERP implementation. So we'll talk about the procurement process, the evaluation process, the contracting process, the implementation process, all that good stuff as it relates to AI. So be sure to stick around for that. And then later in the show, after John joins us, we'll talk about how AI is completely disrupting supply chain management. So before we get into all that, all our guests and everything, though, you also have some social media questions we've received recently on social media and that we want to answer. So what have you got in store for us, Darian?
Yeah, a couple questions today. The first one is, many thanks for the episode. I wonder if a phased approach would be more realistic in many ERP implementations. What would be the best phasing strategy here, and what are the pros and cons of such approach?
Great question. We get that a lot. And phasing is a very solid strategy. I mean, it is, generally speaking, not always, but most of the time, it's a solid strategy that works well for a lot of organizations, especially larger, more complex organizations. You know, the exception here might be a smaller company. It might actually be more advantageous just to go with a big bang sort of approach where you implement everything all at once. But most organizations want to manage risk. So they want to phase things slowly. They don't want to put their entire operations at risk. They don't want to go through too much change too soon or too quickly. So they end up phasing the project. But then the question becomes, well, how do we phase it? Which is why the question comes up so often. And I'll tell you what some of the competing, conflicting issues are. So to back up, phasing sounds good in theory because you manage risk. You can sort of ease into an implementation. You can sort of roll things out at a measured tempo. So that's the benefit or the upside potential. The downside and the things that organizations struggle with, though, is what do you do in the interim while you're rolling out different phases of software? So, for example, if you decide we're just going to roll out our core financials and accounting to start, and then we'll get to inventory management and manufacturing supply chain later, the question becomes, well, what do you do in the interim? Do you use this new finance and accounting back office system and integrate it with your legacy systems, knowing that you're just going to rip out those integration points to put in new technology? Or do you have manual processes that you have as sort of an interim process and then you change it again later? Those are some of the, I guess you call it the downside risks or some of the complexities of going with a phased approach. But you do have to think about that and you know, sort of how much risk do you want to have on that side of the equation versus the risk of going with a big bang approach, which for most organizations, that risk is much greater because you don't want to get to a point where you can't ship product or you can't close the books or whatever. So the way you phase it, though, back to the question, the way you're going to want to phase these sorts of projects really comes down partially to the technology you're deploying. So it depends in some ways how the software is structured. Certain systems have certain modules that can stand alone better than other vendors' modules. So you have to look at the architecture of the software you're deploying to partially use that as an input. And then you also want to look at, where could you get the most low-hanging fruit? You probably don't want to take on the most complex, most difficult part of the transformation in phase one. A lot of times organizations want to get that momentum. They want to learn to walk before they run, or crawl before they walk, or whatever the cliche is. So that's another part of you have to look at too, is more the organizational dynamics and priorities. And then of course you've got to look at, strategically, what are you trying to accomplish? What's most important to you strategically? Because there might be some things that are more important for you to get done now, and other things that might be more down the road types of functionalities. And then the last thing I'll say is a good input is to look at what you have now as a potential starting point for automation. So for example, if you've got an ERP system that covers finance, inventory management, basic warehouse management, basic manufacturing, maybe that's where you start. That's your phase one. And then you add in the more advanced functionality, the more complex stuff later. So you can kind of look at what you've got now in your core ERP system, replace that core ERP system, and then add other capabilities later over time. So those are just a few inputs or data points you can use. It doesn't answer the question of how to do it, specifically for you, but based on some of those inputs, you can come up with a strategy that makes the most sense for you.
For sure. Definitely a strategy that can be customized per each implementation, I'm assuming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, our next question today is, can you compare Odoo and ERP Next, and which one would you prefer?
Oh, wow. Good question. I am more familiar with Odoo than I am ERP Next. Odoo is probably, of the two open source systems, which I'll start off by saying that they're both open source technologies that are kind of that low code, modular based approach to ERP systems. It can make implementation a little bit easier in a lot of ways, because it's more of a, you can have more of a, is less technical complexity. There's less development required because it is a low code, no code type of situation. However, it does require a bit of maintenance, in both cases with both systems. But as far as the differences, I'd say the main difference, honestly, that I'm familiar with is Odoo is just the bigger of the two in terms of market share and brand presence and brand recognition. ERP Next is still a viable option. We just don't see it as much. You're going to see that more with smaller companies, whereas Odoo's kind of moving up into the middle market and starting to get into some more complex types of industries and complex sorts of transformation environments. So that's probably the biggest difference, is just the size, the presence, and then the level of complexity that their customers have. But having said that, I'll be honest, I'm not nearly as familiar with ERP Next as I am with Odoo.
Makes sense. That was some good questions today, some harder questions, I guess, comparing. I'm sure we could do full videos on each of those topics, but I'm excited to get further into some newsworthy articles today.
Yeah, we've got a couple of really great topics we want to dive into here after a quick break. We want to get into some of the concerns among IT professionals about the impact of AI. And then we also want to talk about new autonomous AI agents that Salesforce is introducing in their products, their suite of products. So that'll be really interesting. And then later, after we get through these newsworthy topics, we're going to have John Belden on the show, who's been in this podcast before, but he's going to join us again from UpperEdge. And he's going to be here talking about how AI can be used in digital transformations and ERP implementations, as well as how organizations in general can be adapting to or leveraging AI in their transformations. And then later in the show, after John's on, we'll also talk about how AI is completely disrupting supply chain management. So lots of AI stuff we're going to get to here. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. I'm here with Dominic from Gurus. Dominic, what can you tell us about Gurus BI?
So Gurus BI, or Business Intelligence, is an in-house solution that we design and are now offering that focus on improving data analytics and reportings for business using NetSuite. So Gurus BIs provide all the usual comprehensive dashboarding and reporting solution to help our customer basically get a deeper insight into their operation and make data-driven decision. Basically what you do with a typical BI, but it's specifically catered for NetSuite user.
Got it. Now, what sets Gurus BI apart from other business intelligence and similar tools?
Well, the first one is definitely integrate seamlessly with NetSuite. And it's important, in fact, very important for us. Typically in all the enterprise system, you might be running a CRM, a WMS, all those. The one that has the most complex data model to decipher is typically the ERP because of all the accounting impacts that are needed. So the fact that this BI solution automatically connect to to NetSuite and has been designed around that data model definitely makes us a unique player on the market. It's also a very open architecture. Most of the organization, they have their own preference in terms of dashboarding and visualization. So some companies are heavily invested in Microsoft Power BI, some others with Tableau, some with Google Looker. So everyone has their preference. Go's BI is leveraging Google BigQuery as the warehouse underneath. So this way, the customer can connect their preferred visualization layer. And this way, they don't have to retrain their team if they're already familiar with a visualization layer of their choice. Also, when we bring data in from, say, NetSuite or other system, but mostly from NetSuite, into the warehouse, data model could be it can be very complicated in the NetSuite or in any ERP environment. So we decipher all that, which makes also building reports a lot easier than with a traditional BI. So, for example, anyone who tried to reproduce a balance sheet in Microsoft Power BI from raw ERP transaction know how complex it is to get a correct to the dime consolidated balance sheet from raw transaction. So Go's BI, when you bring the data in the warehouse, we automatically build views just for that, for example, and plenty of others out of the box. So people building reports have a lot easier job to do. And also it scales a little bit very well because, because it's based on Google BigQuery. You can start small and then grow your business, and Google BigQuery and all the Go's BI would handle the increase in volume without ever slowing you down.
Right. No, that's great. Who should be using Guru's BI? What are the ideal customers or organizations?
Well, obviously, customer using NetSuite, as we've made a strong focus on that one. Typically the mid-size market. It's also a BI because it's a BI for which we could say that the total cost of ownership is a lot lower than traditional BI solution. So, when you have a traditional BI solution, you might have to use a database replication tools, try to go with ODBC layer, and then you need to have a dedicated BI team that understands the data model and knows how to build reports. So total cost of ownership can be quite high with traditional BI. With Go's BI, this is all done, from out of the box. So the cost of ownership is lower. So I would say it allows mid-market customer to have a full-blown BI, which used to be almost like reserved for enterprise-level companies. So mid-sized company running NetSuite, they are prime user that can benefit from Go's BI.
So what are some of the more creative use cases that have been solved using your Guru's BI tool?
So Eric, I'm sure you know, but the typical 3 use case of a BI is typically first serving daily and operational dashboard and just a way that is beyond what can be achieved in for example, in the system of their original data source. Another use case typical is performing data investigation. You try to understand a trend or a business event that happened and you need very deep reporting capabilities, or when you need to correlate data coming from multiple data sources. So all our customers use Go's BI for those 3, I would call that usual use case. But we have some customers that have been a bit more creative. So for example, we have customers that use it as a data retention for their legacy system. Right? So I'm sure your audience knows, Eric, that when you move from one ERP, say for example, you move away from QuickBook and then you move to NetSuite, what do you do with the data in the QuickBook? And especially if it's a SaaS base or a subscription, you might be at the risk of losing it. And then, okay, do you bring it in the new ERP? If yes, which level of detail? And at the end, you might be running the risk of cluttering your new ERP with old data. So some of our customers decided to implement NetSuite and implemented Ghost BI at the get-go. So Ghost BI is bringing every night, the latest and greatest of their NetSuite data, which is their fresh set of data. But at Go Live, they also do a one-time load of their legacy data in Ghost BI. And this allows their report all of a sudden to report on two eras of data, the data pre-Go Live and post-Go Live, seemingly in the same report. So for example, the VP sales might not see the difference between sales before Go Live and sales after Go Live because basically it's shown and served in the same report. So data retention for legacy system has been definitely one creative way of our customer to use Ghost BI. Board package automation, that's also an interesting one. So, producing board package on a quarterly or monthly basis is typically a nightmare for CFOs, especially in mid-market business. They have tight deadlines, but they're also a bit shorter on staff than, say, for example, full-blown enterprise finance team. So they don't have more deadlines, but they have the same requirements, especially if they are public or private equity owned, or if they have institutional investors. So they have the same needs to produce board package. Those board package includes, yes, the typical financial statement, but you also need to provide them typically with a bunch of other metrics that are not purely financials. So, and also very often the format is being imposed by the investor rather than what is available out of the box in the system that they use. So some of our customers use that to automate the board package. So as soon as the month end is closed, they refresh the warehouse, click a button, and it produces all the papers needed for the board package. And it allows the CFO to focus on commenting and understanding the numbers rather than spending all countless hours in spreadsheet and PowerPoint to build all those boards, a package, and repeat that like every month.
I could see how that would be very high value, especially for some important stakeholders within a PE-owned firm, or just being able to report up to financial management. What is your view on AI versus BI moving forward as you look to the future?
That's interesting. Huh? So the main breakthrough in AI recently has been around this concept of generative AI or LLM. So basically using AI to generate text, code, or image. And it's strange because it's completely different than what was chased by AI scientists in the last 10 to 20 years. Basically, they were trying to make AI understand data and make prediction on data. And at the end, we ended up with a generating stuff. So, but now, when you think about it, typically a BI solution, especially the legacy, more traditional BI solution, you rely heavily on the IT skills of your dedicated BI team to build report, to understand the data model, and then, okay, you have a nice BI tool, but you still need very qualified staff. And that's where the generative AI take a kind of unexpected twist in the concept of data understanding, because generative AI cannot understand your data, but generative AI can write a SQL query for you or write the report for you. So for example, with Ghost BI, we are leveraging Google AI tools like Vertex AI and BigQuery AI. And it allows people to write query and reports from natural language prompt. For example, a VP sales can type a prompt, something like, write me a query that will show me my top 5 customers for each sales rep. And then we run the query, get the report, fine-tune it again with natural language, all without ever writing a SQL statement. And this is today. So we can easily imagine that with some near future additional automation, BI and AI becomes one, in fact. But it's just a lot easier to use, and more importantly, more in a self-serve manner where business users will be able to build their own report without having to rely on a dedicated full-blown BI team.
Yeah, I love that concept of the convergence of BI and AI, and it sounds like you guys have a tool and you guys are in the right spot to sort of take advantage of that trend and that opportunity to pull that all together.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just starting.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you being here, Dominic. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Eric.
Don't get me wrong. If I fall in the mode of passion.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 189. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm here at Darian Chwialkowski, and I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting Group. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients through their digital transformation journeys. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, produced by Major Tom Productions. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also keep up with upcoming episodes, current episodes as we go here at that same website. So check out transformationgroundcontrol.com to see any of the past episodes you might have missed and to keep up with us here as we publish new episodes each week. So we've got some newsworthy topics we want to dive into. What have you got for us, Darian?
Yeah, a couple different AI topics, which is fitting with today's overall interview topic as well. But the first newsworthy topic today is an article that highlights the growing concerns among IT professionals and the impact of AI on their careers. This article said that 74% are fearing that AI will render their skills obsolete, and 69% are worried about being replaced. Despite this, most IT workers are proactively focusing on upskilling to stay relevant. Though there is a gap in organizational understanding of AI proficiency among teams, the article still underscores the importance of having a staff who can efficiently use AI tools, particularly in crafting and managing AI prompts, as these skills will be crucial for future success of the AI-driven landscape, which is something that we have talked a lot about on here, is staying, up to date and being able to use AI to help your career. But Eric, what are your thoughts on this survey's findings that 74% of IT professionals fear that AI will make their skills obsolete, and how should organizations address these concerns?
Yeah, well, as far as the concerns about the skills becoming obsolete, I think the first thing that comes to mind is how does that affect potential adoption within an organization? Because if it's IT that's presumably going to lead the charge or should be leading the charge for AI adoption within an organization, if the IT leadership is worried about it potentially replacing their jobs or disrupting the value they bring to the organization, then it would make me think that it might slow down potential adoption. And so I think it's a great point. I actually was not aware of that statistic. It's actually a fairly surprising statistic too. I wouldn't have guessed that. I mean, I would have guessed it for other parts outside of IT. I would expect that percentage to be high for, the average, customer service rep or an accounting clerk or someone that's doing some manual office type of work. I can see why they might be more concerned. So I'm kind of surprised that the IT profession is fearing it. So I think that's a big deal. I mean, I think that's something we've got to overcome. But I do think it's interesting that you also say that they're trying to upskill themselves, which I think is the right answer. You want to learn about it, embrace it, just acknowledge the fact that, okay, it might be a disruption. It might be somewhat of a threat to you. I would argue it's probably not as much of a threat as people think it is. But even if there is some risk there or somewhat of a threat, you can either just let it happen to you, or you can get ahead of it and say, I'm going to learn about AI. I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to make myself more valuable with my AI skills and knowledge and capabilities. And if anything, I would think IT people of all people would be the ones that are in high demand, because they're the ones that can help introduce AI and help organizations embrace it and sort of get ahead of the competition. So that's how I think it'll affect the profession in general.
Yeah, definitely. And what you're talking about replacing jobs, maybe people fear it more so outside of IT in other departments of companies. Given that we've heard another statistic in this article that I didn't mention was that 35% of executives plan to use AI within their companies for specific roles. So with this statistic, they're planning to essentially eliminate unnecessary positions in some companies or larger companies with AI. How can companies find this balance between efficiency gains using AI and also, ensuring their employees some job security?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point because, and in fact, I met a client here today as we're filming this podcast, and right before we started filming, I was in an executive meeting with this new client, and we were talking about that exact topic about how people might feel threatened by new technology in general, not just AI, but in this case, we were talking about technology in general. But with AI too, I think it's the same kind of thing where, one of the comments this client made here today is that a lot of their strategic employees, these strategic thinkers, are spending a lot of time just doing manual work because they have to. They've got to go find data, or it's not easy to find. They've got siloed systems. They've got to do manual reentry of data. In some cases, they just don't have access to the data. So there's just a lot of manipulation and seeking and searching and analyzing that it is just very manual. And so you look at how AI can make someone's job less manual. It really opens up, in most cases, I'd say it opens up an opportunity for us to redefine someone's job in a good way, not necessarily a bad way, like we're going to take away stuff, but more, you don't have to do the manual stuff anymore. Now you get to have, it's almost like you get a free assistant, someone that's working for you. It's like your own personal assistant now that's going to do a lot of that work for you. And now you can spend time not only directing AI so that, AI gives you what it is you need, but also so that you can spend more time just thinking and making decisions and analyzing, and, more time doing that, less time manipulating Excel spreadsheets and trying to create, detailed reports out of Excel, or, using manual information. So I think in most of the cases that we're seeing so far with our clients is it's not really creating a situation yet. It may in the future, but it's not creating a situation yet where heads are going to roll or jobs are going to get cut. It's more their jobs are going to change. Now, having said that, organizations can't just say, well, your job's going to get better, we're going to take away the manual stuff, and you're going to get to be more strategic. That's a terrible answer, because that doesn't tell you anything. If you're an employee, that might be conceptually what you are going to do, but you have to be more deliberate and more specific, and you have to get into the org design aspect of things. And this is where change management becomes so important, in that whenever you've got a big change and a big disruptive technology like AI, you need to be really clear with employees how their jobs are going to change and what you expect of them in the future. So if they're going to be more strategic and less manual, what does that mean? What does that look like? What are they going to do to fill their time? And once you do that, then people are going to feel a lot more comfortable. If you don't do that, in the absence of information, they're going to assume the worst, and they're going to assume that AI is going to disrupt their job or take their job away or whatever. So not only does it help you get more value out of AI, but it helps your end employees by giving them some direction and comfort, knowing what their jobs are going to look like going forward.
For sure. And one thing you mentioned is for, these workers to be able to kind of create or use AI in an assistant type of role. What would you say are the most valuable AI related skills that employees or people can develop in order to, get to that place where AI is really helping them with all the manual things?
Well, I think, this is a great opportunity and great time in our progression as a human race and as a professional race, to really experiment. I mean, and so if I'm an end employee, and I do this myself, quite honestly, and just in my own job, I'm trying to figure out new ways every day that I could use AI differently, and make myself more effective and more efficient. For example, I just a couple months ago, I stopped writing my own, interview questions for a guest on the podcast. What I do now is I have AI do it. I just plug in the person's LinkedIn profile. I tell them what the topic is, or I tell AI what the topic is. I kind of give it some real high level directional sort of angles I want to get at. And I say, give me 10 to 15 questions I can start with in this interview. And most of the time it's pretty close, and I tweak it a little bit. And I use that as sort of a high level script or a high level outline in those interviews that we do in this podcast. So that's just one tiny example, but it's an example of how anyone who's doing a job can be thinking about, well, how could I use ChatGPT? I mean, ChatGPT is free, or you can pay the $20 a month version that gives you a little more power and more generative capabilities. But even if you're paying $20 a month for that, think about how you could use it to make your job easier. There's got to be ways you can take that spreadsheet, plug it into ChatGPT, and give you whatever analysis you're looking for, and just try it and see what happens. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to be the end all be all, but it can get you thinking about how you can be more effective and do your job better using AI. And that it really enables that sort of bottoms up usage or that bottoms up approach to innovation. So if you can create some good use cases within your organization of how you're using AI, that's a great career move, because now if you share that with your upper level management, and then suddenly that becomes adopted by the rest of the organization or the rest of your team or your department or whatever, That's a really innovative way that you can be sort of leading the charge rather than waiting for it to happen to you. So of course, you've got to navigate your own internal culture and politics and things like that. I know it's not always ideal, and not every organization is going to be open to that in that way, but it is something that'd be something I'd recommend for people. Is just try it out and see how it might help you, and think of the most mundane tasks you do, and think about, well, could AI just help me do that for me? Or think about the things that just require a ton of thought, and maybe AI can stimulate some additional ideas. I use AI a lot for creativity. I use AI to sort of bounce ideas off of and to give me additional ideas based on my initial ideas. So you just got to experiment, to be my one takeaway.
Yeah, definitely. So be open to trying it in different ways, and trying different things every single day to see what can really help you with your position. And it's okay if it doesn't work out, because you're also teaching the AI at the same time. And that's something that I've definitely discovered when I'm using AI, is that now basically my chat knows exactly what I want every single time, because I'm teaching it, no, I want it like this instead. And then it updates the memory and everything like that. So the AI will learn with you as well. So that's also a really important thing, I think, to take away.
Yeah, it's a good point. I found that too. I use another way I use AI now, generative AI, is I use it to write my blogs. I used to write for 15 years religiously. I wrote a blog every week, 1,000 words minimum or more. And then a couple years ago, I stopped and just started using transcripts for my YouTube videos. And then now it's just, I'll take, like, for example, this discussion we're having right now, I can take the transcript off YouTube once it's out there, plug it into AI, and it can write a blog based on what you and I are talking about right now. And it'll sound just like me, because I taught it, the way I write, the way I want things to look, and the way I want headings and subheadings and all that stuff. So if you read it, it sounds like something I would say. And when I read it, it sounds like something I would say. So it is interesting how AI can be taught, but the key is you have to teach it. Like you said, you've got to be able to direct it and show it and guide it and mentor it. And much like a personal assistant, if you hired like a little mini you've got to teach it how to be you.
Yeah, and I think a topic we actually talked about previously on this podcast was about how ChatGPT can almost teach you things and look into insights further than maybe things that you would notice, like that YouTube video we talked about previously last week, about how you plugged in client notes and it told you things that maybe you didn't even recognize from your client notes. And so maybe you can use that in your job too, and plug in different things, and it helps you realize things that you wouldn't have before. So I think that's also an interesting way that you could use chat specifically.
Yeah, and that was a great topic from last week, episode 188, where we talked about that. And in that video we shared in the episode last week, we sort of that was one where I took my a subset of client notes, new clients that we started working with recently, from 20 different new clients, and I plugged that into AI, scrubbed all the company name and the sensitive info, but then I plugged it into ChatGPT and asked it just to give me the biggest themes and sort of top trends it was seeing in my notes. And it was really interesting to see what it came up with. And it was, in some cases, it fit what I thought, the same list I would have come up with, but there were some things it came up with that I wouldn't have picked up on, which is super fascinating, because I was there, I was in those meetings, I took the notes, but yet ChatGPT saw something in the patterns and in the notes that I didn't, which was super fascinating. So there's, to your point, there's a lot of great ways you could be using AI just to make yourself better at what you do. Even if it's not eliminating your job or eliminating a task, it might make you just better at that task.
So this next article talks about how Salesforce introduced 2 autonomous AI agents, Einstein Sales Development Rep, otherwise known as SDR agent, and Einstein Sales Coach agent, both aimed at enhancing sales operations. These agents are set to be available in October 2024 and are designed to autonomously execute tasks such as answering inbound lead questions, handling objections, booking meetings, and simulating buyer interactions to help sellers improve their negotiation skills. Built on the Einstein One Agent Force platform, these AI agents go beyond traditional AI co-pilots by performing tasks and making decisions independently within set parameters. Salesforce aims to provide sales teams with more tools to qualify pipelines and engage with prospects effectively with customizable options for language, tone, and interaction channels. So I think this is a super interesting use of AI, especially developing into the sales channel. But Eric, what do you think about this introduction of the new AI agents like Einstein SDR and Sales Coach? And will the roles change and responsibilities of sales teams change with these new AIs being introduced?
Yes, I think it can change salespeople's roles and the way they sell. Um, but I think the caution here is that just because the tool exists and just because the tool is there embedded in Salesforce or any other system that might be leveraging AI, just because it's there doesn't mean it's going to work. You've got to teach the sales staff how to use some of those autonomous agents and how it fits into their overall process and how you expect them to use it to sell more. And again, back to the other point just a minute ago we were talking about as it relates to innovation. You want to be clear about how your processes can be better and how salespeople can be using these tools. And so it's one thing to have the tool, show people that it's there and show them how you could use it. You also want to show them like, this is the way we do things. And not that you want to have a total command and control cookie cutter approach necessarily. You may, but you may not. You can still be somewhat flexible and give salespeople a certain amount of independence, but you want to make sure they understand how to use these tool sets within their day-to-day processes. So I think that's really important. And as a broad stereotype, salespeople sometimes are the hardest ones to change because they just want to sell stuff. They don't want to deal with technology. And again, broad generalization, not always true, but for the most part, that's what I found with salespeople is they want to go sell because that's what they're paid to do. They don't get commission on learning how to use AI. They get commission on selling more. So you sort of have to make sure you speak their language and show them how these autonomous agents are going to help them sell more, whether it's through cross-selling or providing better service to customers that leads to more sales or whatever it is. You want to make sure you not only define the process and how it should look, but also how it's going to benefit the salespeople that are using it.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think there are any other challenges that companies will face besides for, maybe some resistance from salespeople when implementing these AI agents?
Well, I still wonder, and we've talked about it in this podcast with Marcus Harris, who's an intellectual property attorney, and he's been on the show in the past on this podcast talking about how there's intellectual property and confidentiality issues potentially with AI. So if you're a salesperson and you take a prospective client's information and plug it into an open AI model, what happens to that information? Is it are you violating any sort of confidentiality or whatever? And that's why earlier when we were just talking about the last week's episode where I talk about how I had used AI to analyze my notes from clients, I made sure to scrub it, make sure to take out the clients' names and whatnot so that it wasn't revealing anything confidential to AI because I don't know, over time what's going to happen to that data. So that's the way you've got to think about that uncertainty and navigate it. So that's one of the risks, and I don't know what the answer is going to be on that. I don't know how that's going to shake out, whatever the cliche is. I'm terrible at cliches. If you haven't noticed that, I'm really bad at using non-traditional language. But anyway, we've got to see how that evolves over time, and there's a lot that we don't know about how that's going to evolve, and a lot of it's going to depend on which AI you're using, which AI LLM and all that stuff. So IP and confidentiality is definitely a risk that needs to be considered as well.
Yeah, and I think kind of talking about, some risks and long-term implications, what do you think are some of those other long-term implications of using AI agents in sales particularly? And do you see these tools lead to a significant reduction in need for human in sales roles, or maybe just a reduced number of people in sales roles?
I actually think I don't think it'll decrease the number of sales roles. I think what it's going to do is it's going to help salespeople sell more, and it's going to help them take on more business, sell more, and just deal with higher volumes. I mean, I just don't see it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see how AI is going to eliminate jobs. If anything, I think it's going to create more engagement with prospects and potential customers, and maybe even fill the pipeline better by using some of these, chat bots and things like that on websites. And for example, we're testing that on our website now too, just to try and get more engagement with people so that we can funnel more opportunities into our sales pipeline. So that's how I see it going. I think that the smarter companies are probably going to view it as a revenue enhancement or revenue increase sort of tool rather than a cost decrease sort of tool. Now, maybe you can sell a lot more with the same number of people. So technically, I guess you're sort of reducing heads because you're not hiring as much as you would have in the future otherwise. But I think generally speaking, it's just going to add fuel to the fire of the sales engine you already have.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I think that salespeople will be able to, like you said, take on a lot more with almost their AI assistant helping them in a way, like we talked about before too. Kind of, as long as they're, making that AI customized to them and teaching their AI how to help them the best way possible. So I think that's all really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good stuff. Well, super interesting. And we are going to, I don't want to say we're going to shift gears because we're not going to shift gears. We're still going to be talking about AI, but from a different angle here in just a moment. We're going to bring on John Belden from UpperEdge. And John is someone I've known for a long time in this industry. Very smart guy. He's been on this podcast before. He deals a lot with upfront contract negotiations and procurement with vendors and SIs. So what we want to talk about is how AI is impacting their procurement process during digital transformations, but also the actual process of implementing new technology as well. How is AI going to affect the evaluation, procurement of new technology and services, as well as actual implementation? We're going to talk about that here with John here in just a moment, and we're going to take some audience questions along the way as well. And then later, after John's on, we're also going to talk about how AI is disrupting supply chain management. So be sure to stick around for that. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com. Check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 189. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. You can learn more about us at thirdstage-consulting.com. And the show is produced by Major Tom Productions. You can find new episodes of the show every week at transformationgroundcontrol.com. Every Wednesday, there's new episodes that come out. So check out transformationgroundcontrol.com for current and past episodes as well. I'm excited for our next guest here today. John Belden from UpperEdge is going to be here with me chatting about AI and how it affects the procurement of software and services in digital transformation, as well as how it affects or could affect digital transformations and the actual implementations themselves. So with that all being said, John, welcome to the show.
Yeah, happy to be here today, Eric.
Yeah, glad to have you. And, you and I have crossed paths in this small world of digital transformation and consulting. We've both been doing this for a while. And this will be a fun topic. And maybe to start, tell us a little bit about UpperEdge and about yourself too. What do you do? What does UpperEdge do? Help us understand you a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate. So let me just give you a quick background. UpperEdge is a third-party consulting firm, third-party advisor, and we've been now around for about 10 years. We were formed based upon I'll call it. It used to be a small company called AMR Research, and when AMR Research got purchased, Dave Blake, who is the founder of UpperEdge, took the I'll call it the advisory service that used to work with people on negotiating their deals with Accenture, negotiating their deals with IBM or SAP. He started up his own third-party advisory firm that actually does the same thing. So our foundation and our roots is a third-party advisory service that focuses on helping clients, I'll call it, work in the negotiation with those types of firms. There's a commercial advisory component of UpperEdge, and then there is what we refer to as a project execution advisory service. And in the project execution advisory service, that's the area that I lead. We really focus on, I'll call it, maximizing the value that our clients get out of their systems integrators. So if you're doing a $20 million deal with Accenture, as an example, Accenture will come and help you get all the value out of SAP or all the value out of Oracle, but Accenture doesn't come with a user manual that says, how do you maximize the value out of the third party, right, or out of your systems integrator once you've signed the contract. And so that's the area that our project execution advisory services focus on, is not on how best to run your project, but how best to maximize the value that you get out of your systems integrator that's running that project with you and for you. So it's a little bit of a variant, and we don't come in and do the project, but we will help you maximize the value that you get out of them. I've been with UpperEdge now about 8 years in this capacity. Prior to that, and this is where you and I met, right? Prior to that, I worked for a company called the Timken Company, manufacturing organization out of Canton, Ohio. Roughly, it was about a $5 billion organization at the time. My last role before I retired there was to lead the Timken Company's transformation and the implementation of SAP. It was about a 5-year program at the time, global program, putting it in. I want to say it was roughly $200 million at the time. So pretty substantial transformation effort. And that's really where I got, I'll call it, my foundation in understanding transformation, and where I became a student of transformation failures, because a lot of the problems that we have, when I got out there and Googled it, it was, well, we're not the first one to have this problem. We're certainly not going to be the last one to have these problems. And that's where I became kind of a student in this space of failures and how they fail, and looking for insights into, can you understand when a project's going to fail well in advance of that failure, kind of predictions. And that's where it really kind of became the foundation of the service offering as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, and interesting background of how your career has evolved, and also how UpperEdge formed 10 years ago. What's interesting, when you were describing that, you talked about the value, maximizing the value of a system integrator. I'll come back to that point, but we have some questions we'll get to on that. You say that because it's very rare, if ever, that you hear someone say, "What's the value you're getting out of your system integrator?" Usually, it's what's the cost? What's the price tag? How can I drive that cost down? It's an interesting take on that I want to come back to, because I think that's an important point.
Yeah, it is. And it's a lot easier to drive higher levels of value than it is to drive lower levels of cost.
It's a great point. Yeah. Let's hold that thought, though. I want to come back to that, because that's a really important area to dive into. And we sort of broke, the questions that I have for you are sort of broken into two halves. And this is not meant to be overly scripted by any means. And certainly, like I said, if the audience has questions, love to get your questions as we go here. We sort of broke it up into sort of a segment up front where we talk a little bit about just some case studies or examples of failures, sort of what happened and just what's the story behind those failures. And then in the latter part, after we get through that, then I want to talk through, just unpack that a little bit, what causes failure and what some of the decisions are and the things that lead up to failure. So to start, I know you study this, you're sort of a student of transformation failures, much like I am, and it's fascinating to learn from, and there's so much good info you can get from it, as unfortunate as those situations are. But you've got a couple in mind, or could you share a couple case studies with us, or maybe give us a couple stories of well known or maybe not so well known?
Yeah, so let me start with one that's probably not well known, and let me make sure that I convey how we do our research first, because the research that we do is all based upon publicly available information in some fashion. Meaning, I'm either looking at lawsuits, I'm looking at published audit reports, I'm looking at, I'll call it company, the company, let's call it the transcripts that come out of calls, their company reports, etc. And the reason I stipulate that up front is because I don't want anybody to think that I'm breaking any confidentiality agreements that we have as a result of working in that particular environment. So everything I'm going to talk to you about is something that has been published and at least well known, or at least available.
Right.
So the first one that I teed up, which is one that is not written about a lot, is a company called Israeli Chemical Limited. And the reason that it's not written about a lot is because the court case is in Israel, and all of the documentation in the court case is in Hebrew. So when I pull those things out, I have to go through the process to actually translate those and figure out what's going on within that particular case. But it makes it kind of unique because there's not a lot of people that are going to go through that effort to do the translation of Hebrew. So it's a niche that I can actually talk about, Israeli Chemical. But Israeli Chemical was the background on this one is it's a chemical company with global operations that had grown through acquisition up into, let's call it 2012. So they were really a conglomerate of independently operating chemical companies. And the transformation foundation was, if we put these companies together and let's say unify the back office, there should be a lot of synergies as an organization that we should be able to capture that didn't come out of these acquisitions. The original project cost was intended to be about $120 million. When they got about a year and a half, maybe 2 years into the program, the cost had ballooned to almost $500 million. So they had put in, let's call it their first implementation. They were getting ready to put into the second implementation. And that's when the ripcord got pulled that said, we can no longer support this. And this one's really interesting because the CEO got fired as a result of this implementation. And it's certainly the foundation for failure can't be we didn't have C-level executive support, because this was his program. He was the one that was driving it, right? And that was one of the areas that actually, I'll call it, it's interesting from the aspect of this was not we didn't have executive support as a failure for that. So I want to start with that one kind of as a foundation. When I look at the history of this one, going all the way back to the beginning, one of the big decisions that this company made that I say put them on the route to failure to begin with is they didn't RFP the actual program. They were working with SAP and IBM kind of on a sole source basis. They took the estimate from both of those firms and they used that as a foundation for the business case to go forward to the board, right? In those particular scenarios, one of those things that we found is you would think that the systems integrator in a sole source environment would be motivated to give you a higher price rather than a lower price because there's no competition. But in fact, it often works in reverse. The systems integrator will give you a lower price point because they know what the hurdle rate is in order to be able to get the project approved, right? Once they get that contract signed, right, then we'll worry about what the real price is going to be because we're already locked in. We already got 70 people working on the project. It's not like you're going to change, and we'll worry about that problem later, right? So the choice not to go out to RFP actually created a scenario where Israeli Chemical saw a lower price point than what was probably going to be. And if they had gone out to RFP and multiple people would have been bidding on it, they would have understood the range of possibility associated with a program like this, because somebody would have probably came in and gave them kind of the real number. Does that make sense? Right.
Yeah. So it's sort of the opposite of what you would think, but I guess that makes sense. You want to be below the threshold, and you also don't want to create any alarms or give them a reason to want to go to RFP by having a higher price tag that may not answer the customer wants to hear.
Yeah, and it's I'm going to deviate here for a second. It's one of the things I refer to it as the SAP, but it's also the Oracle Death Star, right? The initial estimate that you get on any project, there isn't a single person that's motivated to give you a higher number, right? SAP is going to give you a low number. Accenture, IBM, your systems integrator is going to give you a low number. Your business sponsor wants a low number because it's going to make their business case better, right? All of your project team is going to have an optimism bias to say, hey, we can get this done for a lower number, right? And your CEO wants it low. Your chief financial officer wants it low. I even blame part of this on, I'm going to call it your parents, right? And say, well, how do your parents get involved? Well, your parents probably told you when you were young that you can do anything that you put your mind to, right? So now you've got these low numbers and you've got this in the back of your mind, right? That said, I should be able to do this. Even your high school coach probably told you, yeah, we could take that big guy. So everything at the very beginning of a project is driving you to a lower number than probably what's realistic, right? And that scenario really kind of amplifies itself when you do a sole source bid.
There's a weird kind of human behavior thing at play there that's hard to overcome for a lot.
Yeah, exactly, right. So that's kind of the first mistake that Israeli Chemical made. Okay, now the second mistake that they made was, and I say the concept of a single global instance with single global processes that are going to address all of their multiple business units. Okay, while that decision is not a failed decision, what happened at this company was the CEO made that decision, right, without bringing his operating committee, let's say the layer below him, in for the ride, that they hadn't holistically bought into the common set of processes across our organization. And he was driving it as kind of a singular agenda of the CEO, right? So the operating team hadn't bought into this whole thing, and they ultimately were not working with him, right? But they were working their own thing, and it was, oh, by the way, this is a CEO's project. He's got that going, and it's on the side, right? So that global operating model actually worked against them because the rest of the organization wasn't bought into, right, working toward that local model. And so they met a lot of resistance, I'll call it, in the field in that space, right? So that's kind of bad decision number two. The third bad decision that they made was who they put in charge of the project to begin with, right? Now, I know everybody's going to say, well, he's probably going to say they put an IT guy in charge, right? But they didn't. They put the heir apparent to the CFO in charge, right? So they put a finance guy in charge of the program, but the finance guy had a focus on, I'll call it, financial efficiency, right? And not business operation efficiency. And his immediate bias on the program was financial, meaning we need to obviously be able to roll up numbers for the organization. That's what we need in a common ERP system. But his mindset was also on budget and schedule for the program, because that's what he knew and understood as metrics, right, of a good program. So now the project is being purely measured on budget and schedule as it's being raised up to the organization. And, when I look at a project, that's the third thing that I'm worried about is budget and schedule. First thing I'm worried about is operational continuity. Second thing I'm worried about is benefit. Third thing I'm worried about is, budget and schedule. When you put that budget and schedule at the top, it immediately starts to drive bad behavior in terms of the other two, right? In terms of what it creates, right? So the positioning of that initial guy, CFO, that's kind of bad decision number three, because you've got I'll call it the wrong behavior on the program. I'll call it bad decision number 4, right? As they were going through this project, they completely restructured the organization and they changed the setup of the organization and, right, the legal entity structure of the organization. So anybody that knows anything about SAP or Oracle or those areas, the company hierarchy that you set up at the very beginning, right? If you change that hierarchy in the middle of the project, right? Well, I heard somebody say that SAP and Oracle are very flexible, but it's kind of like flexible like wet cement, right? Once it sets up, right, it's really, really hard to change. So now they've got this restructuring that they've got to do, and in the middle of the program, they've got to kind of pivot and redesign the organization inside of the program. So that's kind of bad decision number 4, right? Then you get into, okay, now we're behind schedule, right? Now we've got issues, with the, I'll call it budget and schedule, or budget. We're behind schedule, budget and schedule. How do you catch up? Well, simple. We just take out a testing cycle, right? So they took out a complete testing cycle in the implementation. Now they take out this testing cycle when they go live, right, with their first implementation. All they have is operational problems, right? Operational problems. And at that point in time, that's when the board got involved and said, this project is going to be a disaster. Pull the ripcord. CEO gets fired, right? And they go back to, we're just going to operate in this independent fashion. Now, I spent a lot of time kind of talking about the bad decisions here. And what you didn't hear me do is blame any of this on the systems integrator, right? Because the systems integrator, by and large, was just along for the ride. If you want to put fault on the systems integrator, it was the initial bid that they had provided, right? Not their ability to execute to the plan that had laid out, right? And so to a certain extent, I think they kind of laid in wait, which a lot of them do, right? Because they know where the client's going to fail, and then say, oh, by the way, it's not our fault.
I'm here with John Belden. We're talking about how AI is affecting digital transformations and ERP implementations, but I've got a lot more to cover. We're going to take a quick break here, and then we'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 189. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is the company that Darian and I are affiliated with. Third Stage is an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys, including digital strategy, software selection, and implementation support. So you can learn more about us at thirdstage-consulting.com. I'm here with John Belden. We're talking about how AI is affecting the procurement of software and services, as well as the actual implementation itself during digital transformation. I mean, that operational disruption after go live, that value, or that undermining of value, or whatever you want to call it, negative business benefits that come out of that is so massive. And when you think about on this side of the equation, you've got your cost, and then this is the sort of the value we expect to get. Okay, congratulations, you drove the cost down on the implementation, but now you can't ship product for 3 months or whatever. What's that cost to you? And that's
exactly right. And that's one of those components that that we talk about. Maybe we'll talk about in the future, is this value erosion component, right? Because value erosion on an SI, there's a cost component. Are you getting the value out of the SI? But if you put in something that's a bad implementation, right, the cost associated with the recovery of that bad implementation, that can burn you as well. I mean, about the National Grid example, right? I mean, the cost of the recovery of National Grid was more than the cost of the project itself, right? Yeah. So that's just complete value erosion, all together on that one.
Why do you? I don't know if you have a good answer for this. I don't, but I'm curious if you have a thought on this. But why is it that organizations don't really seem to think about the value after the fact? They're so focused on time, cost, schedule, all the stuff you just described. But why is that? I mean,
I think it's. I look at the C-level. Let's just look at the C-level attention, right, associated with the program. The C-level attention for me goes through. Carol, you just went on video, just so you know.
Yep.
The C-level attention goes through 3 phases, right? Phase number 1 is all focused on value, right? Which is, what's the business case that we're going to get out of this? Where's the value going to come from this, et cetera, et cetera. Once that business case and once that project gets approved, right, then it focuses and it comes into budget and schedule, right? And the reason, from my perspective, that it goes to budget and schedule is because the project managers, when they start getting asked, how are you going to measure this project? It's the only thing that they can elevate immediately to the senior teams, right? It's the only numbers that are available. We got to go in and talk to them about something. What are we going to talk to them about? Let's talk about budget and schedule, because that's what we know. Now you've raised that up to the level of the key KPIs to the senior team, that you can't avoid talking about it as the first thing, because you personally, as the project manager, have created this, right, as the first thing. And that's what that senior team understands. And now that's what they've been conditioned to expect, right? So you're going through that second phase of budget and schedule. Now, when you get close to the go live, right, all of a sudden operational continuity becomes the most important thing, because those guys I'll call it at the top now, are scared to death, right, that you're going to put this system in, and what's it going to do to me? And so now this operational continuity comes raining down on the project team, and the project team now has to fix, or at least try to fix, all of those things and all of those sins that they've committed, right, when they were doing budget and schedule. And the SI then will react and say, hey, we made all these decisions. You're asking us to do a bunch of stuff that we had already planned on not doing. Guess what that means? Change order. Okay. And they just sat there and laid in wait, right? So it kind of goes through phases based upon, what's happening on a program. And part of what I encourage my clients to do, right, is when you launch a project, You talk about all three of those things immediately from the get-go. You raise all of those up. You raise operational continuity, you raise value, you raise budget, and you report on that every single steering committee in some fashion to make sure that that steering committee, is now been conditioned to think about all three of those things right from the get-go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point. A great way to sort of reprioritize the way we're often conditioned to think, especially, the whole project management field, the whole discipline of project management is really focused on, project controls and costs and staying on budget, on schedule. So we're all kind of conditioned to
exactly
think that that's our metric of success. But what you're saying is that's a metric of success, but it's not the most important. It's not the only one.
Right. But it's the one that tends to drive, right, the other factors, right? Another thing I recommend to my clients is they keep three risk matrices, right? They keep an operational continuity risk matrix, they keep a value risk matrix, and they keep a project operating matrix. Most people work in this project operating matrix, right? But if you're going to make adjustments, right, in your project operating matrix that says we're going to make this decision, it should drive you to look at the other two matrices and say, what's the impact on those other two matrices as a result of making this project decision? If we're going to lower, right, if we're going to say we're not going to have this high price $300 an hour guy, we're going to go and lower the cost to a $200 an hour guy. Okay, that's going to solve your project budget issue, but what's it going to do on your value issue? Right? Is that guy critical to that? Is that guy critical? Has he done implementations before? Right? Is it going to put a negative context in that? So I always encourage them to keep three matrices on their risk log: project, value, operational continuity.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it keeps the attention on those important things.
Exactly, too. Right? It allows you to continue to have that as an agenda item with your steering committee.
Now, what about this concept of the system integrator being along for the ride? That was an interesting choice of words. A lot of us expect, and a lot of clients expect, that the SI is the expert. They're going to come in, they're going to do everything. And, on the flip side, on the other extreme, those SIs that take complete control without being transparent and that sort of thing, that creates a whole other set of problems that we might get to today. But what is this going along for the ride phenomena? Should we have reasonable expectation? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so it's another great question. But if you think about, and for those that are familiar with very large programs, right, the accountability for delivery, right, shifts from the systems integrator to the client in the back half of the program. And I'm going to refer to accountability for delivery as these things. Who's responsible for the cleanliness of the data, right? Ultimately, it's the client. Who's responsible for making sure that the people get trained? That's the client. Who's responsible for establishing the tactics associated with putting in the deployment plan, right? That's normally the client. Who's responsible for making sure that all the equipment gets to the site that needs to get to the site so that I can do my, kind of the edge? That's the client. All of those responsibilities, right, occur or at least become really, really visible at the end of the project, right? So the systems integrator is largely responsible for the build, right? The configuration, the building of the RICEFs, right? Putting together, let's call it the test plan, but the client's ultimately responsible for the testing. Again, backside, right? So if a systems integrator waits long enough, right, and hides, let's call it, their inability to deliver on some of those things in the build, if they wait long enough, right, they can almost count on the client failing to deliver on that back half, right? And when the client fails to deliver on the back half, now the systems integrator can say, oh, it wasn't our fault that we went live. It was your fault, Mr. Client, that we didn't go live. So therefore, we're going to extend the project by 3 months. And what happens with me as the systems integrator, I now get the opportunity to fix all of the problems that I had, right, on your dime, because you agreed that it was your issue that we went late, right? So, right. You just sit there and kind of lie. If they wait long enough, right, it will become the client's fault.
Yeah, that's a interesting but concerning point you raised there with that whole thing. And we have another guest who we have on the show in the past is an attorney named Marcus Harris, and he's
I know him. I know who he is. Yeah.
He's an attorney. He focuses on, for the audience, he's an attorney that focuses on negotiation and the legal aspect of ERP projects. And he and I have talked about failure as well. But what's interesting about what you just described and relating it back to contracts is that everything you just described that is the client's responsibility, oftentimes you have these massive documents of statements of work and contract, MSAs and all that stuff. Yep. But what you just described is like a simple little bullet. It's just a bullet of an assumption that that's the client responsibility. It's almost like, oh yeah, here's all the stuff we're going to do. And by the way, you're going to do data. You're going to do the data.
Exactly.
It's like, well, it's just one thing we have to do, right? But
it's the R versus a C in a RACI.
Right.
So who's, it can come down to that, right? So that's part of, again, that's part of what we do as an organization when we're looking at those. Yeah, we'll help people with their contracts, but we look at those contracts and we try to draw their attention to, right, all of those things that they were responsible for. And then making sure that, when we're looking at their plans, they understand that accountability, because the systems integrator is going to drive you to those areas of responsibility that the client needs to assist them with in order for them to achieve their contract, right? They're not going to drive you to, are you thinking about your data over there? Are you thinking about your data over there? They're not going to point that out in a heavy fashion until it gets to the end of the contract, right? And, then I'm going to say, now they might be saying they're doing it the right thing for you, but there's a mutual benefit to them, which is, oh, by the way, now you recognize your own poor performance, right? And it's not our fault. Yeah. And maybe I'm cynical about this whole thing right now, but I've seen so many of them, right? And that's kind of where the practice comes in of, maximizing the value of the systems integrator, understanding how they behave, right? And when you understand how you behave, then you can put things in place to be able to say, okay, let's make sure that we're not letting them get out of this box too early.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Great point. And I share that cynicism with you. I'm very cynical when it comes to this stuff too. Although I do have to ask you what, that dynamic you described of the system integrator doing all that work up front, and that's where they make a lot of their revenue. And then sort of in the back half is where the client responsibilities pick up, and usually they trip up, and then you can blame the client. Is that by design, or is that just sort of a coincidence that that's just how these projects are structured? Or?
No, I don't know. I'm not going to. Well, the things at the end are naturally the client's responsibilities anyway, right? You can't shy away from that, right?
Right.
I think it's more along the lines of the systems integrators are obviously managing to their own contract, right? I mean, that's clear, right? They're not going to put themselves in a position to not make money. They're also not necessarily in a position where it's always to their advantage, right, to notify the client. They'll notify them. Yeah, they'll notify the client, but they're not going to make a huge big deal out of it, because there's always that's not our risk to manage.
Yeah.
Right. That's not our risk to manage. Now, having said that, the contract structure does drive the systems integrator's behavior. Because if you're sitting on a fixed price contract, right, versus, let's say, a time and material staff augmentation contract, well, now the systems integrator is going to be up there pointing as soon as they, right away, that says, hey, you have problems over here, you have problems over here, you have problems over here, because I can bring in resources to fill those things. And that's the way that I generate additional profitability. Right. So the contract structure does drive behavior, right, on the systems integrator with the way that they think about the client.
Yeah. And you mentioned the word fixed bid contract, and especially in the public, government entities and big, large corporations, they oftentimes will have these very robust RFP processes, and they want fixed bid, and they sort of use their leverage to demand fixed bid from their SIs. And it feels like, when I do that, I feel like I'm creating predictability, and I'm capping the total cost of this project, but it creates so much bad behavior. I mean, some of the biggest failures I've seen are fixed bid contracts. I don't know about you, but those.
It does. I don't want to say that I don't like fixed bid contracts, because there's a time and a place for them, right? Especially if you can, the smaller the length of time that you can put your fixed bid contract around, the better off you are, right? The longer you stretch it out, the worse it is, because there's more bad things that can happen to you, right? And more uncertainty on your side to let them get out of jail free on that fixed bid contract. But, value erosion, the first step in value erosion comes when you go from that proposal to the contract itself, right? Because you cannot hold your systems integrator accountable to their proposal. You can only hold them accountable to their contract, right? And that first step of taking that proposal and sticking it into the contract itself is the first step in value erosion, because all of a sudden you'll see deliverables floating away. You'll see new assumptions coming into play. You'll see, you'll see a different, you'll see a different, perhaps a different staff, right, than what was actually sold to you, right? So that's an area of kind of first step of value erosion, is that transfer of proposal to contract. And that's a tough hurdle to get over, because once you've accepted that, now the systems integrator is going to play the game. They can play I'm going to call it, they can play the long game here, right? Because the vendor or the client now wants to get started on this project. We picked our systems integrator, we got our budget approved, right? And oh, by the way, now we have to sign the contract. Well, the systems integrator knows the pressure that's on the client in order to be able to start that project, right? The client will start to make compromises to get that deal signed, right, in order to be able to get that program launched, because the systems integrator, right, will kind of sit there and say, I can't start until I have paper. Then you end up with this, well, let's just sign a letter of intent, right? And we'll get started on the program. I'll bring in my 25 guys to get started. You just lost. You have no leverage now, right, to be able to drive those things in. So it is a tricky game between RFP acceptance and actual contract signature.
I'm here with John Belden. We're talking about how AI is affecting digital transformations and ERP implementations, but I've got a lot more to cover. We're going to take a quick break here, and then we'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me, or visit our website for more details.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 189. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is the company that Darian and I are affiliated with. Third Stage is an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys, including digital strategy, software selection, and implementation support. So you can learn more about us at thirdstage-consulting.com. I'm here with John Belden. We're talking about how AI is affecting the procurement of software and services, as well as the actual implementation itself during digital transformation. Point, because that dynamic, just the stuff that gets slipped in there, that one bullet item, the assumption that you're going to handle data migration or that you're going to do all the end user training. It's just one little line in a contract, but man, they have huge.
Well, and from my perspective, Eric, the single biggest gotcha line that most people don't even think about is client will make decisions in a timely basis.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
See, it's so innocuous, right? It's so innocuous. But what clients don't understand is the volume of decisions that need to be made on an ERP implementation. Most of them have never faced the volume of decisions that are going to need to be made, right? It's not what they do. They make decisions that are most of the time that are well-formed, decisions that they make every day. I got to choose this. I got to choose this. I know what the path is. Then you're sitting here with a set of decisions, which are kind of organizational looking 5 years out, 6 years out. How do we want to operate? They're not prepared to make that volume of decisions at that level, right? And all of a sudden, all of those decisions now need to be escalated because that's not my pay grade to make that decision, right? And all of a sudden, right, they get raised up. Everything slows down to a crawl. Systems integrator says, yeah, you're not making the decisions at the pace that we agreed. Change order, right? And it's just a simple line in there. We'll make decisions in a timely basis.
Or the flip side, or the alternative to what you just described, that just to prove the point that there's no easy way out of that, being backed into that corner, is you could say, okay, well, we'll just go ahead and go with the path of least resistance, which is to build the software the way we're doing things today, which you totally
exactly right.
Then why are you implementing new technology if you
exactly right? So one of the things that we've done as a tactic in those, to make those quick decisions, okay, as a counter to that systems integrator, you will make efficient decisions. As a counter to that, what we've required in contracts and with the systems integrators is to say, the systems integrators will provide X number of days or whatever the number is, 4 weeks notice on major decisions that need to be made, right? So they've got to create the visibility of that, right? And on steering committees, we'll provide a forecast to steering committees of the decisions that need to be made on a timely basis, kind of rolling forward. Because from my perspective, the ultimate, I'll call it elixir for making decisions on time is lead time, right? The more time that I have to make a decision as an executive, the higher quality decision it's going to be, because I'm going to have time to at least socialize that, talk to my people about it. So the more lead time that you can create to make decisions, the better decision that you're going to make. And then you have to force the systems integrator, in certain cases contractually, to say, you're going to give me the lead time, because they already know the inventory of decisions that you're going to have to make, but what's their motivation to show you that early? Zero.
Right.
Zero.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes they don't know, sometimes they're not even on top of the plan ahead, which is another.
Yeah. And now I would tell you, Eric, don't make excuses for them, right? They know 90% of those decisions, right?
Well, they should. If they don't know, they should know. So I'm not. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not making excuses. They should know, and if they don't, then that's a whole other problem.
Yeah, but it's really kind of putting them in a position that says you got to create the visibility of that. Once that visibility is there, the decisions that have to be made, now the client can look at that inventory and they can make a decision. Do I actually have the right people on the steering committee? Right? Because you can take that key decision inventory and use it to pressure test your steering committee and say, do I have the people on the steering committee that I trust as an organization to make these decisions? Because if I don't, change the steering committee, right? Because that's what's going to cause that to be able to go fast. So key decision inventory actually becomes a really good tool to pressure test your steering committee with.
Yeah, that's a great point. Want to take a quick pause, or just a logistical thing. Anyone on this listening to the live stream, if you have questions, feel free to jump in. I'm going to keep rolling with the questions that I've got, but would love to hear any questions you all have. And just to give the audience a sense, and John, you a sense too, we've got people from all over the place: Atlanta, Finland, Belize, Chile, couple Boston. We've got Pakistan. So people all over the place. And then on YouTube, we've got a bunch of questions coming through here too. But
hopefully we're hitting the mark on this stuff, right? And as you told me, you don't know where this is going to go. So I tend to just spin off in other areas based upon what you prompt me in.
Yeah. Well, actually, why don't we actually jump to some of the questions? We're getting a bunch of questions on YouTube, and it's funny because before we went live, I said most of the questions usually come from LinkedIn. Now they're coming from YouTube, but it doesn't matter where they come from, whatever platform you're watching on. Please feel free to chime in. But question here is it a bad idea and a reason to fail if a company gets more than a single ERP? So if I go with a single ERP, am I less likely to fail than if I do a best of breed and get a separate CRM, HCM, and more?
Actually, it's a great question. We're actually seeing more, let's call it mixed implementations now, more combination of digital core, right, coming from the primary ERP vendors, right, whether it be Oracle or SAP or whoever, along with kind of the best of breed attached to the outside. We're seeing more of that. And I think one of the things that's driving that is I think a lot of companies are taking an approach, especially in the SAP space, on where they're sitting on an ECC platform, right? They know they're going to have to go to S4, but part of their migration strategy to go to S4 is to, I'm going to call it, de-risk what they've currently got in that ECC platform by taking out certain capabilities that are buried in the ECC platform, putting them into a best of breed, right, that I can connect to the ECC platform. And then when I get ready to upgrade, the amount that I'm actually having to upgrade is less than it was before, right? So it's a way to kind of de-risk the migration while I might be picking up the value of where the big value add actually is in going to that next platform. So we're seeing companies kind of decouple the core of their ERP and what was in there before and taking that best of breed, and it doesn't necessarily have to come from that same software provider.
How about this? Let me, not in defense of the vendors, but let me use their talking point here to see your response.
Sure.
You shouldn't do that because you want a single system, fully integrated. You've got a single throat to choke. You don't want to have to deal with all the integration and data issues. You just want that single platform from us.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do that?
And from a technology point of view, I would have no issues with that argument, right? From my ability to make choices, and again, now I'm going to talk from a pure negotiator point of view, right? I've lost all my leverage. I have zero leverage whatsoever going forward in the future, right? So it's like I don't even think I want to put myself in that position just for that particular point, right? So I get nervous from a leverage position. I'll give you the quote of the ultimate failure of that, right? Have you ever heard the story about a company called there's Oregon State, right? Cover Oregon was their program, and it was to put in the replacement for it was a substitute for the Obamacare provided by the central government. Each state had a choice, right? Do you want to use the national platform or do you want to use your own platform? Okay. The state of Oregon decided that it was going to do its own. They were putting in Obamacare. They put in also their healthcare systems. They decided to replace them all. They went wall to wall, everything Oracle, completely, right? And the logic was, well, it's all coming from Oracle. It all works together, right? But you can't find a single client that uses all of those Oracle products together, right? In that kind of a configuration. So while the logic makes sense, right? That was a huge failure. They spent $300 million, didn't take one application. Didn't take one application. There's a lot of problems with that one. I could go on and on and on with that one. That's a classic, unbelievable.
Yeah. And even from a technical perspective, you look at SAP is the one that drives me the most crazy when they say this, but they say we've got the fully integrated solution. You're on the S/4HANA platform, blah blah blah. But really, if you look at what they've got, I mean, they've got S/4HANA, but then they've got Concur, they've got SuccessFactors for HCM. They've gone out and acquired all these other point solutions that aren't integrated. It's no different. Just went out and bought a random HCM or whatever system. Now certainly over time, sure, maybe they start to integrate a little bit better and start to merge the things together. But vendors like SAP will say that, but in their practical reality implementing, even from a technical perspective. A lot of times it's not even true that you've got a fully integrated solution to your.
No, and what really SAP really offers in that space is it's not fully integrated, but we have people that have done this integration, 1,000 times. So we have a core set of expertise in terms of actually making that connection work. Right. That
Right.
becomes their value prop, not that it's fully integrated, but we have people that we know how can make it work.
Right. Right.
Because you're going to pay for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, similar kind of question here, but maybe a little bit different, but it's a little bit different from that single ERP versus best of breed question and whether or not that contributes to failure. But what about niche solutions, more industry vertically focused solutions versus the big, broad ERP systems? Do you see any correlation there between?
Yeah, actually, from a research point of view, okay, when you're dealing with a niche area, let's just say I'm dealing with plant maintenance. Just take that as an example, because that's often an area that comes out of the ERP system, and you're going to put in Maximo, or you're going to put in something like that for plant maintenance. We actually don't see as many failures in that space, right? And the reason, I'll say, isn't because it's a niche solution. It's because it's a niche process within the company itself that you tend to have singular decision makers, people who can make that decision in this space, and you're not having to get procurement, supply chain, finance, and all of those other people to agree on what the answer is, right? So you're actually able to make decisions faster, and they're not nearly as complicated, right, as if I'm trying to do HR, finance, payroll, right, supply chain, and my commercial systems all at the same time. Now you're dealing with what I'm going to refer to as wicked messy problems, right? Because you're dealing with really technical, complex problems, but you're also dealing with organizational issues, right? And when you put those two things together, right, the problem solving time becomes much more extended, and the authority of who gets to make the decision is much less well understood. Right. So it's not necessarily the niche project that makes it successful. It's the scope of the implementation across the organization, from my perspective, that causes the issue.
I'm here with John Belden. We're talking about how AI is affecting digital transformations and ERP implementations, but I've got a lot more to cover. We're going to take a quick break here, and then we'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Just tell me what you've got to say. Tell me, I've been waiting for so long to hear.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me, or visit our website for more details.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we publish. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management, or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you, or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 189. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian, Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is the company that Darian and I are affiliated with. Third Stage is an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys, including digital strategy, software selection, and implementation support. So you can learn more about us at thirdstage-consulting.com. I'm here with John Belden. We're talking about how AI is affecting the procurement of software and services, as well as the actual implementation itself during digital transformation. Certainly if you do an HCM implementation or CRM, that is going to just go faster by definition, partly because it's a smaller scope, but also because of what you're saying, which is the, less decision-making complexity that goes into that.
Exactly. Right. Who gets to make the decision is much clearer.
Right.
Right. It's much clearer in those areas. And the accountability for value is much clearer.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I don't know why I thought of it. That question from the audience member about that singles or the focus solution versus the broader solution triggered this thought. What about Agile? Agile.
Sorry.
I have a similar opinion on this, but I'm curious.
Oh my God.
Here's that.
So if they're okay, now I'm going to be really, really opinionated here, right? if there is one thing that absolutely drives me out of my mind, right, is the concept of we're going to do an agile ERP implementation, right? Because, listen, agile works great if you're dealing with, a product that you are going to be developing that you're going to implement that doesn't necessarily exist today, an add-on, right? But when you are replacing, right, what you already have, there's no, oh, by the way, we're just going to skip finance today, right? It didn't make the backlog, we can't put it in. You have to connect all of the dots, right? You have to connect, it's like a doctor going in and say, we're going to do agile surgery. No, if he runs out of time, we forgot to suture him up in there, but we ran out of time and money. It was agile. No, you got to tie everything off, right? So ERP agile, maybe there's agile ways to do the delivery and set up what you need to build and execute on that. But you can't say I'm going to just time box myself into and deliver what I can with agile for an ERP. So I'm sorry, I was really opinionated on that, but it's like, no.
Well, I have similar opinions on that. It's almost like, where agile does work, and I think where people maybe have blurred the lines too much is like with a really innovation focused company like Apple. They've got a product that market research isn't even uncovering a need for it, but they want to get something out to the market to test it out and see if people want that, if there's any demand for it, or learn how to,
they're extending the capabilities of what they already have, right?
Yeah.
Not replacing something that already exists.
Yeah.
Right. And when you're in that, like I said, when you're in that replacement mode, you got to tie everything off. You can't do it fast.
Well, it's almost, whenever I hear someone say, on one hand, we're going to create a common operating model, we're going to standardize and globalize our company, and we're also going to do an agile implementation. Right there, that's a huge disconnect, and those two things are an immediate.
Yeah, exactly. 100% agreement on that, right? When the other thing that agile does, and it's great for the systems integrators, it's really, really hard environment to get an accountability model set up in an agile space with the systems integrator, right? Because what are you measuring them on, right? It's almost like I got to figure out how I'm going to quantify the backlog. You're going to deliver the backlog, but now you're always in the space of grooming the backlog. Things are coming in, things are coming out. How are you going to hold them accountable to something that's in that space? It's a really tough contracting environment for the client. Great contracting environment for the systems integrator.
Yeah, it's a built-in excuse for why something doesn't work. The whole point of Agile is I'm going to put something out there, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to fix it. So right there,
and we met schedule, and we met, we did budget and schedule. We met, but what you got delivered may not meet your expectations of did I actually get the value out of it. Now, all of the agile, bigots out there are going to come back and say, oh, blah 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 blah, But ERP implementation with agile. Agile techniques, not agile methodology, holistically.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And selectively, I think you use that word too, just selectively and where appropriate, but not a broad-based full ERP transformation. this session, I'll be honest, is flying by. I didn't realize we were already almost an hour into the discussion, but there's a lot we could talk about.
Well,
Probably
you can have me back again sometime, Eric.
I may have to, because I'm not going to get through even all my questions and other questions here. But I guess let me maybe a good place to sort of bring this full circle. I know we've talked about a little bit. We've scratched the surface of the whole operational disruption and the operational stability piece of it. We've talked about cost and schedule, but let's talk about this concept of the value erosion a little bit more. Maybe just help unpack that a little bit more. I think that kind of brings us full circle in the conversation.
Yeah. So the first piece of, when we think about value erosion, we think about value erosion from two aspects, right? One is exactly like you said, right? It's well, if you're going to pay $100 for a solution, right? You measure value by the cost versus what did I ultimately get out of it, right? What was the expected business benefits? And value erosion can occur in one of two ways, right? It can occur by it cost me more to deliver than what I expected it to occur, right? Or it can occur by I spent what I expected and I didn't get nearly the value out of it that I had anticipated, right? So value erosion can occur in one of those two ways. If I look at programs in general and you think about that concept of value erosion, we typically see anywhere between 30 and 50% of value erosion on these big programs. Either A, they're not delivering all the value, or B, they're going over budget and they're spending way more than what they thought they were going to spend, right? And that's not an exaggeration. I mean, you yourself would know if I said, hey, what's the average overrun of spending on a program, right? It's going to be in that 25% range, right? Well, there's 25% value erosion right there. And then if you ask yourself, did they actually get all of the, did they fully implement everything that they thought they were going to implement? I would guarantee you they probably overspent and under implemented, but they're only talking about the 25% budget overrun. They're not talking about the value that they didn't get, right? So it's not a hard leap to go into that 30 to 50% of value erosion, right? When you jump into this thing, right? So when we think about value erosion, we think about it in three sections: bid to launch, right? So from the time that you receive that RFP to the time that you actually sign a contract, right? What value actually erodes in that space? Sometimes it's the contract. Sometimes it's the assumptions that you're making on your own ability to deliver the project, right? That I can tell you right out of the gate. If the systems integrators are saying, well, you need to provide 20% of the resources and we're going to provide 80%. Well, I know right out of the bat that that's an invalid assumption. It's never going to work that way, right? So you can tell right from the get-go that there's going to be value erosion right out of the gate, just because of the way that it's set up, right? So part of it is trying to protect the client right out of the gate that says, you need to understand what the cost is going to be, real cost, before you sign up for this thing, because there's already a 20% cost increase coming that you don't know about, right?
Right.
Then I would call value erosion, I'm going to call it from launch to go live. And it's kind of all the crap that goes on during the course of the execution, right? That the systems integrator to a certain extent is taking advantage of. You're not making decisions fast, right? Or, oh God, the great one is, we're going to come in and do a quality audit, right? We're going to do a quality audit and we're going to identify all the problems that the client is having, right? As a part of this quality audit. And all of a sudden you've taken the attention away from actually delivering on the program itself, right? And setting the foundation to give you a change order in the future because you haven't corrected those things. Right. So that's another space of that. And then I'm going to say another area is just this whole contingency utilization. What you just talked about on the fixed bid, right? Whenever you do a fixed bid, there's typically a certain percentage, right, of the bid itself, which is the assumption that the systems integrator is going to bear some of the risk, right? Try to get them to show you, once you've signed that fixed bid, right, where they're actually assuming that risk and where they're spending the additional money on your behalf in order to be able to implement the program. It doesn't work like insurance, where you pay your risk premium and then they give you a detailed readout of everything that they paid for on your behalf. Doesn't work like that. right? So the fact that you can't hold your systems integrators accountable for utilizing that contingency that you paid them to utilize, right? How do you actually, that's value erosion, because it's almost like you just gave them away 10%, right? It's almost like it's not like it's fixed cost. They treat it like it's fixed profit.
Right.
It's a fixed profit contract. And then, kind of the last section is what happens from deploy to hypercare, right? Lots of companies define hypercare as, hypercare often is defined as a period of time, not a set of conditions that you need to exit, right? That says, yes, we got everything right. Right. So, how many times have we seen a go live go in where the systems integrator knew that there was a lot of problems before the go live, right? Went into hypercare, said hypercare is 6 weeks or 4 weeks. We're going to fix all the major problems that we can fix within that period. And then we're going to turn that over to your AMS team to fix. Right. So you really didn't get the full value of what you expected out of the systems integrator because they found a way to move it into hypercare and then out of their purview.
Yeah. And then you have the whole dynamic too of where when you get past hypercare, that time-based hypercare that you're talking about, by then you're either so exhausted from the implementation, you're just glad to move on to your day job, or B, you're just moving on to the next phase of the project.
And that's exactly right, because then they take, it gets me all fired up, right? But then they also take advantage of that, right? Because while you're in the business of trying to fix all of the problems that exist, they'll drop that next SOW in front of you, right? And they'll say, okay, we've got to get this signed in order to be able to move on to the next phase. You're so fatigued, you don't even want to look at those things anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And guess who has the leverage to move forward?
Yeah. Well, and then you think about value optimization. So you talk about value erosion, and then there's sort of the flip side, which is how do you optimize, not just don't erode it, don't lose it, but how do you gain as much as you can? And so many companies fail to spend that little bit of extra time and money at the end, not just doing hypercare, but optimizing. Like, okay, we're not getting the full value out of the system, or let's dust off that business case we did, 2 years ago when we started this project and see what kind of benefits we're actually realizing versus what we expected, and figure out how to optimize that. If and that's the level of effort and cost to go into that activity right there, I would argue is the highest ROI of anything you can do in a project, because you get so much value out of that. But yet you're either too tired to do it, or you're already moved on to the next.
And what I like to say too, when there's a lot of problems in the hypercare, right? The project's calling it hypercare, but the business is referring it to hyperbolic, right? Everything's freaking going crazy, right? So we're in the hyperbolic period of the program, and the systems integrator is just sitting there watching the clock run,
right?
Because they know they've got an exit strategy,
right? I'm gonna have to steal that line from you. That's great. That's brilliant. Hyperbolic versus hypercare. Well, good. Well, I feel like this is sort of an abrupt place to end, but it's as good as any, I suppose. I feel like we definitely need to have you back on here, because there's a lot we didn't cover, and we were going to go through a couple case studies, and we only got through one because we had
we only talked about one. Right?
We had so much good stuff to talk about on that one, so we'll have you back. Maybe we'll talk about another one and dive into some other topics here. But thanks a lot for being here. This is a really good discussion, and you have a very good way, a very clear and energetic way of conveying this stuff. So I appreciate having you on the show here today.
I was happy to do it today.
Thank you, John. Great conversation. Thanks again for being here. I appreciate the audience questions as well. We've got a lot more to cover. We're going to debrief, follow up on some of the things that John and I just discussed. And we're also going to get into AI and supply chain management and how AI is affecting supply chain management. Be sure to stick around. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 189. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, we just had a great conversation here with John talking about AI and how it affects digital transformations and ERP implementations. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can always learn so much from people that are working with AI on the day-to-day and what lessons they have learned from using it, and kind of see how maybe I can steal some of the things he's doing and try to use it in a different way. So I think all of that is super interesting. I want to flip some of the questions you asked him. I want to get your perspective on some of it, as this is a full AI episode. So one thing that, he talked about was what he sees for the next big evolution of generative AI. So what do you see as the next big evolution of generative AI, and how should organizations be preparing for it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I wish I could say I had a clear vision of where I think AI is going, but I don't. I do think, though, I still feel like, and I felt this way for a few months now, that I feel like in manufacturing, especially manufacturing production planning, I feel like that is a low-hanging fruit area that could have a massive impact on efficiency and effectiveness for manufacturers. I also think the supply chain field is another one that could really benefit from generative AI. I mean, you think about all the things that a manufacturer or supply chain manager has to do their jobs. I mean, they've got to create, vendor records or vendor master data or product master data. They've got to take CAD drawings and plug it into, create a bill of materials. There's just a lot of stuff that manufacturers and supply chain managers have to do that's very manual, and they're dealing with so many different moving parts and different pieces of the organization and different data points, and it ends up inherently putting pressure on humans to do things manually and to kind of wade their way through that detailed process. So I think those are two just broad areas of low-hanging fruit. I think certainly, finance and accounting and financial services and other industries are going to be affected as well. But I feel like manufacturing and supply chain are two areas that could really benefit the most from AI in general.
Yeah, and not that you teed that up or anything, but that is a really good tee up to what our next topic is going to be, which is how AI is completely disrupting the AI, how AI is completely disrupting the supply chain management area of businesses. I know we're going to play that YouTube video, but if you want to give everybody some context of what that is going to be about.
Yeah, and it is a good segue into that video. And we're going to play you a clip here from my YouTube channel where I talk about how I think AI will impact supply chain management as a field and as a profession. And so we'll play you this clip here and be curious to hear your thoughts, what you think, audience listeners, and let us know in the chat what you think, how you think AI is going to affect supply chain management, and also how you think AI is going to affect the world in general. If you see certain areas of low-hanging fruit, I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments wherever you're listening or watching here today. So be sure to drop those there, and maybe we'll come back and revisit some of those comments in a future episode. But let's roll this clip of my YouTube channel where I'm talking about how AI will impact supply chain management. Supply chain management is one of the areas that we most commonly work in. We help clients evaluate and implement different technologies and process improvements to improve their supply chain. And one of the biggest challenges supply chain managers see today is not only is the world of supply chain management changing rapidly because of COVID and the post-COVID world that we're in and this global uncertainty that we face, but also because of artificial intelligence. How is artificial intelligence impacting supply chains, and how could it improve our supply chains? Those are just some of the questions I want to talk about and answer here in today's video. Now, before I dive into today's content, I want to share with you a resource that I think would be super helpful. As I mentioned, Third Stage Consulting consults organizations throughout the world on how to improve their supply chains and the technologies that go along with their supply chains. And to learn more about some of the best practices we found, I encourage you to download our guide to supply chain management. You can find that via the QR code in front of you or the links below. This guide will share with you a number of best practices, emerging trends, as well as top 10 rankings of different types of technology that can help your supply chain. So if you want to learn more about that, check out the QR code in front of you to download it for free, or you can go to the links below. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent, technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. Effective supply chain management begins with a solid understanding of customer demand. If you understand what your customers' demands are, it's going to be a lot easier to plan and predict how you need to purchase raw materials, produce whatever product it is you're producing, and then get that product to your end customer. So it all starts with effective demand forecasting, and AI is ripe to address this problem that organizations have historically had regarding accurate demand forecasts. Organizations struggle to find the right data and to make sense of all the data they do have to identify what they think demand is going to be. And that variation between predicted versus actual demand is something that can create challenges in supply chains. If our forecast is off and we're inaccurate in our forecast, we're going to be planning our entire supply chain around faulty assumptions. So wouldn't it be great if we could get a better handle on customer demand, knowing that we're not going to get it perfect, but we could potentially get a lot closer with some of the artificial intelligence tools that are out there today. I'll give you a couple examples of different data points that AI can use to help predict demand. If you look at traditional supply chain or enterprise resource planning systems, ERP or supply chain management systems, those two technologies house a lot of transactional data around customer purchase history. So a lot of data around how seasonality has affected your business, how demand has ebbed and flowed over time. And the better data we have in our ERP systems or our supply chain management systems, the more likely it is that we're going to be able to accurately predict the future. However, historic information only gives you so much of an understanding of what the future holds. AI allows us to now dip into other data sources, maybe even outside of our organization, to help us better understand and predict how customer demand might evolve over time. For example, if you are selling a product that is highly seasonal or based on weather patterns, think of someone that sells ice cream or anything else that people like to consume during summer months, or maybe some type of product that is preferable to be consumed during winter months, like hot chocolate. You look at producers of those types of products, and if we can predict what weather patterns are going to do in different parts of the world, we could use that data, and artificial intelligence could make sense of that data, combined with our internal historic data, to now provide a more robust and a more refined model of how customer demand might evolve in the future. And this is just a very small example. There's a lot of different data sources we could use around macroeconomic trends, regional trends, just general consumer behavior, a lot of different data sources out there that maybe we're not even looking at today, or if we are looking at it, we're just trying to make qualitative sense of it. But now with the power of AI computing, we can be taking those data sources and providing a better foundation for customer demand going forward. Now let's assume we do have a very solid customer demand forecast. We understand with a high degree of precision what customer demand is going to be. That only gets us so far. That gives us a starting point. Now we've got to figure out our entire supply chain and how we're going to build our supply chain transactions and activities to support that demand forecast. And in today's world, with fragmented data and fragmented systems and incomplete data and systems, organizations struggle, even with the best demand forecast in mind or in hand, they still struggle to plan their supply chains to effectively meet whatever that consumer demand is. So here's where we start to look at inventory management. If we can better understand the raw materials we need to acquire and when we need to acquire them, and when we need to have the finished products in place and where we need to have those finished products in place, which distribution center or which warehouse do we need to send that finished product to, then we can more effectively meet the customer demand that we forecasted. So if you think about customer demand and the forecast we've created, now we've got to back up from there and take all these different data points to figure out how do we work backwards to satisfy that demand at the time we think we need to satisfy the demand. Now, an easy answer would be just to stockpile a bunch of inventory. Just keep a bunch of inventory on hand at all your different warehouses or distribution centers, but that's cost prohibitive, it's highly inefficient, it's highly unprofitable for organizations to do that, and it involves a huge outlay of cash. So the better we can optimize and plan when we need raw materials, when we need to manufacture the raw materials, and when we need to get the finished product to customers, the better off we're going to be. And so inventory management is something that AI is ripe to help us optimize as well, because now it can take the outputs from the demand forecast that AI also helped us generate, and it can now allow us to understand when and how and where we need to acquire certain raw materials, produce those materials, and ultimately have them on our shelves in our warehouse, and ultimately to our customers in their shelves at their warehouse. So inventory management and the forecasting of what inventory we need, when and where we need it, is something that AI is completely transforming in the world of supply chain management.
I'm here playing a clip of how AI is going to impact supply chain management. We've got a lot more to cover. We're going to continue with this video here in just a moment, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 189. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm here with Darian, Chwialkowski, and we're playing you a clip of our YouTube video that talks about how AI is going to affect supply chain management in the future. So let's jump back into it.
In the world of manufacturing, there's been a concept that's been around for decades now, and it's called material resource planning. So to simplify, MRP is a complex way of taking all these different inputs, ranging from your demand forecast to your inventory on hand, to figuring out how you're going to produce the materials and the finished materials you need to satisfy your customers. And if you think about it, you're starting with this end demand forecast that tells you when a customer needs something or when you think they're going to need something. But now we've got to back up and figure out when do we need to manufacture that product. And MRP is the technology that ties together all those pieces to allow you to manage the production in a way that allows you to satisfy that demand. And MRP is something, even though it's been around forever, it's been around for a long time, companies still struggle to this day to do MRP well. And the reason for that is because it's a very complex process that requires a lot of data inputs, and most organizations don't have good data and don't have good systems to help them accurately predict demand. And MRP, even though it's been around for decades now, has been something that organizations struggle with even today. And the reason for that is because they typically have siloed systems, they've got siloed data that's not accurate, and they don't have access to a lot of data and information that would help them better anticipate when they need to produce certain products. So with the advent of AI, now suddenly we have a mechanism and a tool that can take mass amounts of complex data and allow us to better understand and think about how we're going to manufacture and when we're going to manufacture the products we need without relying on all that tribal knowledge and all the spreadsheets and the incomplete data and the intuition and all that stuff we rely on today. Now suddenly AI is going to make it a little bit easier for us to make sense of that mass amount of complex data. So as we're thinking about how we're going to move raw materials and finished goods around our supply chain, one of the big components of that is logistics and transportation. If we're manufacturing something overseas, we've got to figure out how to get that product onto a boat and get it to our distribution center. If we're working domestically, we've got to figure out how to get a finished product from a warehouse or distribution center to our end customer. We've got to figure out how to source raw materials and how to get the raw materials from wherever we're getting it to wherever we need it to manufacture the finished product. So there's a lot of logistics and transportation that goes into any supply chain, another very complex management of a very complex network that is fleets and trucks and ships and all the different ways that we're going to use to get our raw materials and our finished goods to where they need to be. Again, AI is perfectly suited for these very complex processes that require lots of data, mass amounts of data that most humans can't comprehend, and most humans can't even comprehend it well enough to plug it into a system or a spreadsheet to give them the answers they're looking for. But with AI, not that it's a silver bullet, not that it's easy, it does give you a tool set that now allows you to optimize your logistics and your transportation to not only drive higher profits, but also to help organizations manage their carbon footprint too. A lot of governments throughout the world today are imposing regulations on how much of an impact an organization has on the climate and on the environment. And AI doesn't fix all the world's problems, but it is something that can be used to help improve and manage and track what the impact to the environment is. So if you're an organization that's based in the EU, for example, the European Union requires certain reporting on how you're impacting the environment, and AI is something that can help track that for you. So logistics and transportation is something that can be well managed using some of the modern AI tools available today. So far, I've talked about how AI can help process data and make sense of data and make recommendations on how to manage a supply chain. But there's also the generative AI side of things that can help a supply chain. Generative AI is sort of like your ChatGPT or your DALL-E. If you've used either of those tools and you've asked it to create a picture or asked it to write something for you, that's generative AI. It's creating something for you based on parameters you gave it. And you think about supply chain management, there's a lot of generation that humans have to do that's highly inefficient or could be more efficient with AI. You think about something as simple as creating a product master. We're acquiring a new raw material and we've got to create a product master or an item master. And creating that item master in your system has historically been a manual process, but now generative AI can help offload that. You also have vendor masters. As you track and create new vendors in your system, all the different raw materials providers that you work with, for example, you can now use generative AI to create those vendor masters within your system. And then in the world of manufacturing within supply chains, you have the bill of materials. And the bill of materials is essentially a hierarchy of how raw materials come together to create your finished product. And that's something you have to have in your system so that you can manage your MRP and your production and some of the things we talked about earlier. And generative AI is well suited to help create bills of material, especially if you're a highly engineered make-to-order sort of environment where there's a lot of engineering design and CAD drawings that need to go into your bill of materials. AI can be a game changer in those cases as well. So these are just a few examples of how generative AI can enhance and optimize supply chain management as well. So that was the video from my YouTube channel where we talk about how AI is going to affect supply chain management. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that video, Darian?
Yeah, so I think one thing that, mentioned, I know it was only briefly, but that stood out to me was the potential of generative AI to go beyond just processing data and making recommendations for supply chain management, and how in the future could play more of a creative role in making supply chains, better for everybody. Which I think is something that is super interesting to think about, because yes, in the short term, processing data and making recommendations is probably the first things that are going to come from AI and going to help with, the efficiency of supply chain. But what's next after that? And I think that was a really good point. So if you could maybe expand on how you kind of see where past processing data and making recommendations, where do you see AI helping supply chain?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly processing data is a big part of it, but beyond that, it's also, some of the generative AI stuff, like we talked about with John earlier in this episode. When you think about, creating a vendor master or creating a product master, which are two pieces of master data that need to go into core back office systems. And if a vendor master, for example, is what a supply chain manager would use in procurement to sort of track the pricing of a particular supplier, to track any sort of transactions or bids from suppliers, all that kind of stuff. And you've got to create a master when you have a new supplier. And a lot of that's a manual process right now. So if you could use AI to help you create that customer or that vendor master, that's a good example. Even just something like, taking a CAD drawing for like a manufacturing or engineering firm. If you have a CAD drawing that gives the technical specs for a product, and then you've got to turn that into a bill of materials of how that product's going to be manufactured. Right now, that's a pretty manual process where you take the CAD drawing and then you create a bill of materials in a different system. But if you could use AI to take that CAD drawing and create it for you, or at least give you something to start with, then that could be a way to really accelerate that process. So just a couple of really small examples, but you add that up on a large scale, it can add up to a lot of efficiency gain over time for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that's after, after what happens when you implement AI, but the implementing AI part into supply chain can also be very complex. So what are some of the key factors to determine whether the AI implementation will be successful for a supply chain company or not?
Well, I think, the first thing is, if you back up and think about it, AI doesn't have to be disruptive. You don't have to stop doing what you're doing today to implement AI, which is kind of unique when you think about putting in a new supply chain system or a new ERP system. You sort of have to rip out an old one, put in a new one, whereas AI can sort of coexist with whatever it is you're already doing. So it doesn't require you to turn off an old system, turn on a new one or whatever. So there's a lot of different ways you can experiment and sort of like just pick off little pieces or little parts of your process and start to use AI, selectively in high value places throughout it. So that's what I would do, is I would start with just recognizing that it can be business as usual. We're still doing what we always do. We're using the same systems, but now we're just introducing tools using AI to make us more efficient using our existing systems that we have in place already.
Right. Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to, what we've been talking about this whole episode is how can individuals also find ways to just start using AI in their roles as well. And then make that, like you said earlier, then maybe get adopted by the whole company and how they're using AI. So it's not so disruptive, like you said, as like a full ERP implementation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great stuff, though. I'd be curious to hear from the audience, though. What are you seeing, or what do you think, if you had to predict the future and speculate, how do you think AI is going to be used in supply chain management or other disciplines as well? Where do you see the low-hanging fruit or the real potential upside in your job or your peers that you work with? I'd love to hear your feedback, so drop that in the chat, and we'll use that for future content on this podcast as well. So Well, great. Thanks for another great episode, Darian. Thanks for being here. And thanks to John Belden, our guest from earlier, for being here. And also thanks to you, the audience, for listening. Most importantly, thanks for being here and for joining us. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. You can learn more about Third Stage and how we can help you with digital transformation journeys in your digital transformation journey. You can check us out at thirdstage-consulting.com. And again, my name is Eric Kimberly, and this is Darian Chwialkowski with me. We'll see you next week on Transformation Ground Control. Have a great week in the meantime. Take care.